Hey, welcome back. We are out in the beautiful snowy countryside today to practice our winter landscape photography and give you some creative ideas on how you could interpret wintertime in your own photography. So in case you ever doubted our dedication, just look at us. We're out here shivering our bippies off today, but we are having a lot of fun in the process. Winter seems to be getting shorter and shorter in some parts of the world, so we hope that this lesson gives you a few ideas for getting out there to practice and interpret the winter season before it's too late. Okay, let me talk about the lenses that I've got with me today. So I've got my trusty 24 to 105 millimeter zoom lens. This is the one that I really like to use when I don't want to be changing lenses all the time and I just want to keep things simple and fluid. There's a lot that I can do with this lens. And if it's snowing outside, you have to ask yourself how often you really want to be changing lenses anyway. So I find the flexibility of that really valuable. I've also brought my 100 millimeter macro lens with me, or 90 millimeters, I guess, because I'm hoping that I find some kind of cool icicles or some other winter subject that I could go in for a close-up shot with. So I've just brought those two lenses today, trying to keep things simple and light as possible. Okay, I've also got some filters with me today. I'm not even sure that I'm going to use them, to be honest, but I do have my polarizing filter. This just clips right onto the front of my lens once I get a lens ring attached, and that would help me reduce some glare if there was a lot of bright sunshine and white snow and I needed to knock down that glare effect. Then I would have the right filter for the job. I've also got a 6-stop neutral density filter here in case I encounter some kind of flowing water and I want to try some kind of interesting slow shutter speed effects. And then of course I need something to occasionally wipe off and clean those filters. Okay, I've got a couple other things here just in my front pocket. I've got my lovely viewfinder lens cleaning cloth. But actually what often happens in the wintertime is that your lens can get wet with snow or rain or whatever. And actually, if you just go for your lens cleaning cloth, all you end up doing is smearing the water all over the place. So I've got this little absorbing cloth that I'll use to first dry the lens off before I do the little polishing cloth. Okay, so those are some of the things that I take with me when I'm doing cold weather photography. Of course, it's going to be very individual and it depends on what you have. There's no two photographers that are going to pack exactly the same way. It's about using the gear that you have and getting out there to do some photography. So that being said, let's pack this stuff up and let's get out here and take some pictures. All right, well, we got really lucky today, and that's because it snowed last night and we got out here and everything's just been covered in a nice new layer of snow. This beautiful puffy layer of snow covers up all the old footprints and leaves us with, you know, a really kind of pristine look in our photos. The other nice thing is that if it snows, you get this dusting of snow in the trees, and when there's a little bit of snow kind of on top of the branches, these trees just kind of get etched out, you know, against the background, and there's just more definition and more texture there. So there's a lot of advantages to timing your winter photography so that you head out right after it's, you know, dumped a little bit of fresh snow. The other thing is that you can see today is a kind of a flat, light day. It's not a brilliant, you know, blue sky day that you might imagine walking around taking pictures on. And that's actually an advantage for us because I feel like the atmosphere of these kind of slightly gloomy winter days, actually it's a little bit more appropriate for winter photography. And it's going to help differentiate our pictures from some of the other snapshots that people take when they're just kind of out walking the dog on a beautiful clear day. Okay, let's just spend a minute talking about why we came to this location actually, what it actually holds for us. So we've got some really interesting elements to work with in this particular spot. What I really like about winter landscape photography is contrast. We've got this beautiful white snow, but if all we have is snow, then the scene might lack a little bit of interest. So what I like about this location is that we've got this stream running through. There's some darker tones there. There's also some water and interesting texture to work with in the stream. We've also got these cute little barns that have this, you know, winterized, sleepy feeling. And I really like putting that little human element into shots like this because it just adds some kind of a cozy character, if you know what I mean. And somehow the story of the shot just seems to work a little bit better. So anyway, we're gonna work with the barn and the river, and we've got beautiful mountains in the distance. I'm thinking there's a shot down here somewhere in the river. We can hopefully get a little bit of this icy foreground and rocks in the shot and kind of connect it to the barns and the distant mountains in the background. So I'm looking and I'm trying not to just go tromping right down into my scene. I don't want to disturb the foreground, of course. So I'm kind of trying to visualize how the shot looks from over here and from over here before I actually commit to going down there. So anyway, I got my 24 millimeter. I'm zoomed back to 24 millimeters and I'm gonna get down here. Hopefully I can get a nice composition going. Pretty cool. Okay, so I'm experiencing a typical problem with wintertime snowy shots. I just took a picture and looked at the result on the back of my camera, and it looks a lot darker than it ought to. And that's because a lot of this snow in my foreground and back here in the middle ground, it's reflecting a lot of light back toward the camera, and the camera is kind of overcompensating and giving me kind of a muted grayish tone overall in the scene. So actually what I'm going to do here for my next shot is just bring up my exposure compensation to +1, take the same shot again and see if the snow looks a little bit more brilliant and the scene looks a little brighter. Definitely a big improvement. So rather than like setting up my tripod right away and going through all of that process, I'm actually just shooting handheld at the moment to try and work out my composition and figure out which of these rocks and barns I actually want to set up and photograph. So I'm just keeping it really quick and easy right now, and just composing and looking and finding my way into the shot. Oh yeah, we're getting closer. I'm really liking how the barn's over on the right-hand side, and the mountains are real strong up there in the upper right corner. So I'm just looking for something to kind of balance the composition down on the left-hand side to give the left-hand side of the photo some power too. Otherwise, it's just all kind of happening over on the right-hand side of the picture. So boy, these spires up here on the ridge are really very impressive. And we're actually getting some pretty nice light. This is working out really well. I'm glad we came out here. Okay, I'm really liking this spot a lot. It's time to invest a little bit more energy in the fine tuning of the composition, but you can see right behind me here, I've got a little bit of nature kind of poking up through the snow, kind of like signs of life in the winter landscape, which I'm enjoying. So yeah, I'm gonna play with this, and I'm gonna play with the shape of these boulders back here. And I love how there's just these like eyebrows of snow kind of covering up the tops of the boulders here. There's so much texture to work with. So let's invest a little bit more energy here in fine tuning the composition. And pretty soon it'll be time to set up the tripod. So actually one of the reasons why I'm on the tripod here is just so that I can really make sure that I get the composition that I want. There's actually quite a lot of light out here. I'm not doing a long exposure, and I don't really need the tripod to stabilize my camera. But I find that when I'm working with foreground elements and mountains way off in the distance, sometimes it helps to slow down and put the camera on the tripod, because you can really be precise about angling the shot and making sure that you don't accidentally clip off important elements in the composition. Okay, so I had a little problem here. With my lens zoomed out to its widest setting, I still couldn't really incorporate the foreground that I wanted to. I wanted to really show this grass kind of coming up out of the snow, right underneath the camera here. But unfortunately, when I angle my camera up, even 16 millimeters, I switched lenses, even 16 millimeters wasn't wide enough to get the base of that grass and these mountains in the background. It's a pretty tall scene. So I'm turning the camera vertically, and I'm gonna take a series of shots from left to right. And when we get back to the computer, I'm just going to stitch them together, and that'll give me a much wider composition that I can crop from.
Oh, cool.
Wow, I found a really fun detail to play with here. There's just a little hole in the ice you can see here in front of my lens, and it's like the ice is trying to close that hole up. Beautiful little sort of fingers of ice and lovely texture in the foreground. So I'm trying to get this and the barn and some of these mountains in the shot, and unfortunately with my camera at this height, I have to kind of angle downward to get this foreground element, and that's kind of closing out my background. So actually what I need to do is I need to get the camera much closer to the foreground, but as you can see, I can't go any lower on my tripod. So I just want to show you a little tripod tip here. It's a trick that I use sometimes when I need to get the camera extremely close to a foreground element. So stand by here as I do a little inversion trick. So the first thing I've got to do is sort of unscrew this bottom plug on my tripod center column. I'm taking that part out, and then I'm going in from below. So I'm going to end up hanging my camera underneath the tripod, which is going to allow me to get much, much closer to that foreground. So let's just get these legs extended a little bit so that we have a little bit of room to work underneath. I'm having to kind of punch through the ice. Let's see how we get on here. This is one of the main benefits of having this L plate underneath my camera rather than just sort of the type that screws into the bottom of the camera, the type that come with your tripod. This is an extra accessory that really makes life easier when you're trying to shoot a vertical composition under your tripod. It's looking pretty good. We're a lot closer now than we were before. This is looking cool. Take this shot here. Having to use even a little bit more exposure compensation. I'm going up to plus 1 1/3 stop of overexposure because I've got a lot of ice in my foreground. I've got a lot of snow in the middle ground and in the background too. And so if I don't compensate for that brightness, I'm going to end up with a fairly dull look in this photo, and it's really going to kind of belie the brilliance of the snow and the nice clean brightness of this winter scene. Okay, so one of the things about winter photography is it's really worth checking the shot on the back of your camera, and not only that, but really looking at the highlight warnings that you can get displayed on the back of the camera here. So I'm checking out the shot and I'm looking at my histogram, and I notice that I've got a problem with my highlights. The top of the barn here, the snow on top of the rock here in my foreground is all blinking. I'm getting this black blinking warning, and that tells me that those parts of my shot are pretty overexposed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to correct. I'm going to use a little bit less exposure compensation this time and bring those highlights under control because I want the detail and I want to be able to see some of that texture in the snow when I get back into Lightroom. So just going to make a little correction here for my exposure and try the shot again. Okay, so I just corrected my exposure, took another shot, and I'm realizing now that I have actually another kind of a problem with my shot. So I think I overdid it. I ended up creating a picture here which is a little bit underexposed, and I know that because I'm looking at the histogram for this picture, and there's a gap on the right-hand side of my histogram, which doesn't make sense to me. That gap means that there's no brilliant whites in my photo. And of course, I'm looking at this scene here, and there's plenty of patches of white snow. There should be a brilliant white in this exposure, but it's not showing up because the picture is underexposed. So anyway, looks like I overcompensated, so I need to correct that problem. and just slow the shutter down, maybe 1 or 2 clicks, just maybe 2/3 of a stop. And let's try one more time and see if we can get a shot with that perfectly balanced histogram. That's wintertime photography. You know, you've got to be careful not to overexpose your highlights because you want some nice texture in the snow, but you've got to be careful not to underexpose the shot too, because if we underexpose, we miss some of the detail in the barn or maybe in the darker parts of the trees, and those details are important too. So we got to be careful with that exposure. Okay, that's looking a lot better. I'm seeing a little bit of clipping on my highlight warning on the back of the camera. That means just a little bit of blinking black highlights, but it's only showing up on a few parts of the shot. It's not, you know, all over the snow. So I think this exposure is going to work out really well. But remember, if you want to play it safe, you can always bracket your exposure. So I was standing there looking at my foreground, I thought, hey, why not put the macro lens on and kind of explore some of the details down in here? So I'm just getting the camera in really close and trying to capture the fun little ice formations and the bubbles in the ice. And there's of course this like dark water behind. So it's giving me a chance to play with a lot of different compositions here. So I'm just gonna keep working it and try to find my way into a good little patch of texture and you know, ice crystal patterns. Hey, do you need a little refresher on how the exposure triangle works? Then head over to our website and check out the resources page. It's loaded with PDFs that you can download completely free, including a fantastic and very visual summary of how the exposure triangle works. It even goes further to explain the 6 different creative exposure choices that you need to make no matter what kind of photography situation you're in. So head over to viewfindermastery.com and download that one today. Well, my cameraman keeps on telling me that my ratings are gonna go up dramatically if I fall into this ice cold water here. So he and I are having kind of an ongoing joke about that. Watch yourself. If you happen to be crawling around in a frozen creek, you do not want to get wet when the temperature is below 0. Okay, so that was just a part of one of our fun monthly lessons that we send out to our amazing members over at viewfindermastery.com. And if you want to learn photography in a clear and structured way from professional photography educators, then come and check us out over at viewfindermastery.com. We've got courses in all kinds of photography topics, from portraiture and sports photography to landscape and Lightroom, you name it. But you don't have to take my word for it. Check out our Google and Facebook ratings to hear what others are saying first, and then I would love to see you join us over at viewfindermastery.com. Okay, I hope you enjoy these pictures. I would love to hear from you down in the comments below. Please give us a like and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our next video. Thanks very much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.